Washington County, Maryland, a man has been arrested for the murder of a woman and a 4-year-old girl. Now, the victims, 40-year-old Elise Wars and 4-year-old Khori Ashton.
At 40 years old, Elise Wars carried her 4-year-old daughter's whole world in her hands. On November 14, 2022, a camera at a Hagerstown, Maryland hotel recorded her walking back to her room with a man she'd only just started dating. That footage would end up being the last time anyone saw her alive, and it would take almost 2 full days before anyone realized something was wrong. Before we go further, welcome to Crime Cry Homicide. If you're new here, stick around, because this isn't just a story about what happened to Elise Wars and her daughter Khori. It's about how easy it is to miss the signs when someone you love brings a stranger into their life. It's about a mother who did everything right and a 4-year-old girl who never got the chance to grow up. If stories like this matter to you, hit the subscribe now, because we cover cases like this every week. And honestly, some of them don't get the attention they deserve until people like you start talking about them. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Before she was a name attached to a tragedy, Elise Wars was just a mom, trying to figure things out, like a lot of us are. By November 2022, she and her daughter Khori Ashton had been living at the APM Inn and Suites on Dual Highway in Hagerstown. Not a house, not an apartment, a hotel room for months. If you've ever gone through an unstable stretch, you know that a hotel room isn't really home. It's a holding pattern, a place you tell yourself is temporary. But from everything her friends said afterward, none of that instability touched how she loved her daughter. People who knew Elise described her as warm, devoted, the kind of person who, according to family, brought a light into every room she walked into. That's not a phrase people use lightly at a sentencing hearing. That's the kind of thing you say about someone who mattered. And then there was Khori, 4 years old, cheerful, bright, the kind of kid who becomes family to everyone around her, not just her mom. Elise's best friend, Priscilla Dorsey, wasn't just a friend, she was Khori's godmother. That's how close this circle was. We don't know much else. No one's released details about Elise's job, her schooling, or who Khori's father was. And honestly, that privacy was probably intentional and probably deserved. Some things don't need to be public. What we do know is that a few weeks before November 2022, Elise met someone new. His name was Javon Hines. He was 22. 18 years is a big age gap, 22 and 40. Most people would clock that immediately. But from what friends told police and reporters afterward, this wasn't some long, slow-building relationship where red flags had time to show up. It was new, weeks old. Hines reportedly didn't have a fixed address at the time, and yet somehow in a short window he became close enough to Elise that her friends considered him her boyfriend. Here's the part that's hard to sit with. Police initially only called him an acquaintance, not a boyfriend, not a partner, just someone who'd been around. It was only after digging that the real nature of the relationship came out. Nobody's ever said how they met. Mutual friends, work, and app, nothing has ever been confirmed. And in a strange way, that gap in the story is almost more unsettling than if we knew, because it means there was no clear moment where someone could have said, wait, who is this guy? Most people meet someone new and don't run a background check. You trust your gut. You trust the way they made you laugh or the way they were good with your kid. Elise trusted hers. By November 14th, that trust had already run out of time. Monday, November 14th, 2022. This is the day everything changes. Security cameras inside the APM Inn and Suites caught Elise walking back into the hotel. Javon Hines was with her, and in his arms he was carrying 4-year-old Khori into the room while Elise walked beside them. Think about that image for a second. A little girl carried in by a man her mom had known for a few weeks, trusting him enough to let him hold her daughter. That footage is the last confirmed sighting of Elise and Khori alive.
They called her because the hotel staff realized that they hadn't seen her or Khori, and they see them every day. She was supposed to be going to Baltimore, and she said she would call me, and she never did.
No camera ever shows them leaving that room again. Based on what investigators pieced together later from forensics and the timeline of the footage, both Elise and Khori were killed later that same evening. And here's where it gets hard to hear, but you deserve to know the truth of what happened, not a softened version of it. Court documents indicate both victims were in bed when they were shot in the head. Investigators couldn't determine for certain whether they were asleep, but the evidence suggested whoever did this was standing directly over them when it happened. a mother, her 4-year-old daughter. In the room they'd been calling home for months, and the man who'd walked in with them roughly 11 hours earlier, he wasn't gone yet. Around 11 hours after entering that room, the same hotel cameras caught Hines again. This time he was wearing a face mask, and he was pushing a luggage cart, loading it up with items from the room before leaving the property entirely. Investigators believe this happened after the murders had already taken place, which means for those 11 hours, whatever happened in that room had already happened, and he stayed long enough to plan an exit, long enough to pack things onto a cart and calmly wheel them out past a hotel lobby like it was checkout day. Nobody stopped him. Nobody knew. For almost 2 more days, nobody knew at all. Friends started noticing something was wrong when Elise stopped answering calls and texts. If you know someone who checks in regularly and they suddenly go silent, your stomach starts to turn a little. You tell yourself it's probably nothing. Probably her phone died. Probably she's just busy. Hotel staff noticed something too. Neither Elise nor Khori had been seen leaving the room in days. On Wednesday, November 16th, hotel employees finally went in to check. What they found was one of the most devastating scenes Hagerstown had encountered in years. At around 4:20 in the afternoon, Hagerstown police arrived and found Elise Wars and Khori Ashton dead from gunshot wounds, both pronounced dead at the scene. Police called it immediately what it was: a targeted, deliberate crime. Not random, not a break-in gone wrong, deliberate. And now the case had a name attached to it already, because everyone knew exactly who'd walked into that room with them 2 days earlier. Detectives didn't have to guess who they were looking for. Surveillance footage and witness interviews all pointed to the same man, Javon Hines. What followed was a full-scale, multi-agency manhunt.
Amen. As that story was running tonight, Hagerstown police now telling us that they have arrested a suspect in this case. They say Elise and Khori were found with gunshot wounds. The suspect is Javon Hines. Now, police are calling him an acquaintance. We will update you as soon as we learn more.
Within about 24 hours of identifying him as the suspect, Hines was located in Elkridge, Maryland, roughly an hour away from Hagerstown, and arrested without incident on November the 17th, 2022. He was charged with first-degree murder, 2 counts, second-degree murder, first-degree assault, reckless endangerment. A judge denied him bond. He wasn't going anywhere until this case played out in full. But here's where it gets complicated. Because this isn't a story that ends in a clean, satisfying conviction. And if you're expecting one, I want to be honest with you now, it doesn't come. You'd think with an arrest this fast, a motive would follow quickly too. It never did, not publicly. Police never announced a clear reason for why this happened. Prosecutors never presented evidence of some specific fight, some blow-up, some dispute that led to this. Friends of Elise's kept coming back to the same thing. This relationship was brand new, weeks old. Nothing about it suggested it was heading toward violence, let alone something like this. And that absence of an answer, it's almost its own kind of cruelty.
What do you want to say to whoever's responsible?
I hope you die.
We're coming. They're gonna catch you.
That little girl didn't deserve it. Elise didn't either, but she's grown. That little girl didn't even live life. She was only 4 years old.
When there's a motive, even a horrible one, people can sometimes make some kind of sense of it. Jealousy, money, revenge, something to point to. Here, there was nothing to point to. Just a young man, a new relationship, and an act that ended 2 lives in a hotel room that was never supposed to be permanent in the first place. So if there's no motive, what was actually happening inside Javon Hines' mind that night? As the case moved through the system, Hines underwent psychiatric evaluation, and what came back changed the entire direction of this case.
We know Hines will stay behind bars. Today, a judge denied his public defender's request to either set a high bond amount or release him to family to be under supervision. He faces multiple charges, including first-degree murder and first-degree assault.
Mental health experts concluded that Hines suffered from schizophrenia and that he was in the middle of a psychotic episode at the time of the shootings. In June 2024, a judge found him not criminally responsible for the murders under Maryland law. He wasn't sent to prison. Instead, he was committed to a secure psychiatric facility where he remains under the court's authority. I know how that lands for a lot of people, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you how to feel about it, because reasonable people land in very different places on this. Some see it as the legal system doing exactly what it's designed to do when someone genuinely wasn't in control of their own mind. Others look at 2 people who are gone forever and feel like not criminally responsible, doesn't come close to accounting for that loss. Both of those reactions can be true for different people at the same time. That's not me dodging the question. That's just where this one sits. During the hearing, Hines addressed the court directly. He apologized for killing Elise and Khori, calling his own actions heinous. Prosecutors acknowledged plainly that no outcome in that courtroom could undo what had happened. Family and friends gave victim impact statements. Some talked about their fear that he could eventually be released. Others didn't want to talk about him at all. They wanted to talk about Elise, about Khori, about who they were before any of this. If there's one thing that came through clearly from everyone who loved Elise Wars, it's this. They don't want her remembered as a headline. They wanted people to know she was generous, warm, that she'd been through hard circumstances and still managed to be, by every account, an incredible mother, someone who lit up a room. And Khori, 4 years old. A happy kid with a smile that apparently nobody who met her forgot. A life that ended before it had any real chance to start. Their deaths left a mark on Hagerstown that hasn't gone away. What started as a brand new relationship, only weeks old, ended in the deaths of two people who had absolutely nothing to do with whatever was happening in the mind of the person they trusted. To Elise's family, to Priscilla, to everyone who loved Khori like she was their own, we're sorry for what you lost. No story, no video, no explanation ever makes something like this make sense. We just hope that telling it carefully and telling it honestly is some small way of making sure Elise and Khori aren't forgotten. If you want to see more cases covered with this same level of care and research, subscribe and let me know in the comments what you took away from this one. There's a lot here that doesn't have easy answers, and I'd genuinely like to know where you landed. Thank you for watching to the end. I'll see you in our next true crime story.